I am YC Beats, and a friend asked me if I could do a tutorial and show how to make beats or how to mix things together, but he didn't ask me what type of tutorial I should do, so he asked me if I could just show people how I'm going to make my beats, but now I'm not sure if I should. I was thinking about doing something like trap or the WEEKND type of beats, since they are very common during these days, and I'm listening to the WEEKND a lot, but I'm also very inspired by BTC, and I'm thinking about maybe I should start with I was thinking about to start with a piano, because this is what I usually do, and I think piano is a great instrument to start with. You can also use other instruments, but I liked the emotional feeling, and there are so many things you can do when you're using a piano. You can use it for aggressive beats, you can use it for sad feeling, or you can use it for film types of music, hip hop, rock. You can use it for anything. It depends on how you play the melody and how you mix things together. When I start with the melody, usually I'm playing around with my keyboard. Sometimes I record the notes that I am playing, but in many cases I am too lazy. So I'm just playing around with the keyboard to figure out some notes, and then I'm going to draw them into the piano roll, and this is what we're going to do now. I would say a few years ago I used to start my beats around 170 BPM, but since I'm listening to the WEEKND a lot and I'm kinda inspired by that trap feeling, I'm doing my beats in something around 130. So I think this is a good tempo to start with. The first thing that I do when I start with a piano melody is that I create an automation clip, because as you can hear, when I hit the notes, the notes, they do only sustain as long as I hold the keys, and I like to hit the key only for a short time like this, but then the sound, that is more that staccato type of sound. You can use it for certain kind of beats, like Dr. Dre is using that a lot, like this. I don't know how to play it, but something like this. Something like that. I like to use the more, how to describe, I would say dramatic type of piano melodies, and I enjoy the sound when the notes are, if they sustain for longer. And if you want to create the sound with a real piano, you have to use the pedals, and you can do this in Fruity Loops as well. Then you go to generators, and the next thing you have to do is you have to go to the VST plugin. That, for instance, I have loaded the Contact player, and the piano sound comes from Contact, so I go to Contact number 1, and then you have to go to the MIDI channel. I think it is 64, and it is right here. I think it is always number 64. Do the right click, create automation clip, and there we go, there's the automation clip. So if I play the notes right now, just one moment, so I just have to, okay. So now the sound is not sustained, but if you draw the automation, so by the way, excuse my English, so it is not my native language, so my native language is German, and I was thinking about to do a tutorial in German language, but then a friend told me it might be better if you do it in English, since you can reach a much bigger audience, since there are only 80 million people in Germany, but there are 7 billion people or something in the entire world, and it's the world language. So I tried to do it in English. I also need some exercise, so why not? And now if I play the note, you can hear the difference. It's sustaining, it's lasting longer. And I usually start at A for me. So everybody is doing it different ways, but for me it is easier to play or to draw in notes if I use A, since you almost only use the white keys. One technique that I'm using when I try to find the chord is that I'm opening the piano roll and I'm using the loop mode. So I have only one bar, and I do not start. You can start with a melody, but you can also play around with the chords like this. So A minor or something like that. So I'm drawing in those types of notes. And I like those keys because they sound dramatic, and now you can add even more notes, for instance like this or like this, and you can remove it, or you can do it like this, and you just can play around and just see what sounds the best for you. Just play around with it. just did a few adjustments so that the melody sounds a little bit more realistic. I have to change this a bit. Like when you change the velocity, I don't like to use the same velocity for each key because it sounds kind of static, but if you do it like this, for instance, you have a little bit more realism in the melody. So let's listen to it again. Oops. And there's one note that is just too loud, so I just want that they match each other. So I put this one a little bit down. There's something that they use a lot in trap music. There's a device, it's called grow speed. And what I like to do, it is basically, it gives you a lot of opportunities. It's like a gate filter, or you can play sound backwards. And it also has the ability to create that halftime kind of effect that is often used in trap music. So what it actually does is that it pitches down the melody, and it changes the bars from like four bars or 4 steps per each bar to 3 steps or 2 steps per bar. It is called halftime because when you use this effect, the tempo of the sample or of the melody gets reduced like 75 or 50%, so it's not just halftime, but I just can show you what I mean. What I do is I change the transposing. I have to find a key that I like. Once I'm finished with the melody, I start pre-mixing it. So I will change that at the end, but what I do at first is I'm going to add the equalizer. I think it's the equalizer number 2, and if you go to the presets, you just have to do 2 clicks, and then you have that low and high cut filter. And now you can change it, and you can, what I always do is I like to cut down the high ends and I like to cut down the low ends, because later if you add other instruments, they need to blend with each other, and if you do not use any filters or equalizers, their frequencies, and how to explain it in English, so basically for each instrument or each sound got its own frequency, and you have to use filters to remove some of the frequencies so you can make room for other instruments, and you also can change the character of the sound. And I start with something like this. I will show you what I mean. There's another effect device that I like to use. It's called tape filter. basically it is a simulation of when, like in the 60s or 70s, they were recording the audio track on a tape, and then they had to put the recording of a tape to another tape, and every time when they mix, I don't know how to explain it, but so basically you have one recording and it's recorded to one tape, and then they put it on another tape, and this recording ends up on another tape, and every time you record it to another tape, there is a little bit of distortion. It will change the pitch a little bit, and it will also add a little bit of distortion. So I think, in my opinion, it sounds more realistic and more alive, and this is what this effect device does. There are different types of tape filters or vintage tape effect devices, and I like using this. It's from Isotope 7. It's named Vintage Tape, and we can just play around with the presets and just see what it does. When I turn this up, there will be a little bit more distortion, as you can hear, like this. But I think this is too much. That device. With the equalizer, I'm going to remove the frequencies that I don't like, and here in this range I think it is around 180 or something, and there's that muddy sound that I want to remove to get a cleaner sound. So I put this down, and let's play it again. Not too much. Something like that. So now, after a little bit of playing around, I have found something that I like, and I think I'm going to use it the way it is. And the next step is that we going to layer the melody. So I copy paste it, create a new pattern, and so we can take another instrument and use the same melody, and then we can change it from there. So I always have difficulties to decide what to use next, since I have a lot of VST plugins. Sometimes I wish I had less, because since I have so many sounds, it is sometimes very difficult for me to decide which sound to use, because there's just too much. But I have something in mind that I want to use. I think it is a sound in the Chill House expansion. What's the name? I think it's the Chill House or something like this expansion. Minimal House. There it is. It's the House Volume 1 expansion, and I like those Chillin' House Lounge sound. I think it's number 2 or 3. I just have to turn it down a little bit. in Nexus, and it's called the degrader, and I'm using it a lot, so I can show you what it does. It's basically like a bit crusher. This sound gets a similar procedure. I'm going to add growth speed using the halftime effect, maybe add a little bit distortion and filters to it. So sometimes I'm going to add the bass at this point, but it really depends on what I want to add, and I think an electronic piano would fit very well now. And there's this Spitfire library for the contact player that's called Spitfire North 7 Vintage Keys, and they have some great sounds in there. They also have great basses as well. So just let's try out. I think maybe this lo-fi type of sound will fit. We can play around. And I'll copy paste again. But this time I think we should bring in a little bit variety to the sound, and we can change the notes from there. There's also another library that I fell in love with, so I was thinking about to add some of the drums now, but I think I should reconsider that because I wanted to go into a weekend kind of direction with this beat. And if you're listening to The Weeknd or to Drake, they use distorted vocals and vocal samples. They are edited with autotune, vocal synths, vocoders, and this type of stuff. And if you like to use these sounds, there's a pretty cool plugin. It is named Exhale by Output, And it is something like it is a vocal library, but it is a vocal choir library, but it's not a natural choir. It is more like the how to describe the sound, more a synthetic type of sound. It sounds very digital but also organic at the same time, and it works a little bit like an MPC. So you can choose between playable notes and play it like a choir or a synthesizer, but you can also choose slices, or you can choose loops. And what you can do there is, it is a little bit like autotune or like the pitcher. You can change the root note, and for example, if I forget which key I was using, but if you're playing a song and the root key is D, for instance, and you can change the root key and exhale, and you just have to play around with those slices. You can change the pitch individually, you can add effects, you can change the tempo. Just let's play around with it. So what I do first is, we go here, there are the three main sections. Notes are the playable instruments, loops are the loops, and slices is basically the same. There are a few differences. I think the slices does more work like an MPC, and I'm not 100% sure, but they are very similar, those categories, but they have different sounds in there. And I use the loops a lot, and sometimes I'm even using the other sounds. Just maybe we can find something that fits. So if you go to this category, we can pick, let's try, this is what I mean. So you have so many sounds, and I like female vocals that sound emotional, something that you can use for RnB type of beats, or also for trap. That sounds too weird. They're also pretty weird sounds. I do not like any of them, but some of the samples are pretty dope. Doesn't sound so bad. going to add some of the drums, and I will show you a little trick how to get that weekend type of feeling. So I'm creating a new pattern, and there are a lot of different ways to create the drums, and I layer them. When I do the weekend type of drums, I'm using my Contact player, and there are a lot of libraries. There are also, even in Fruity Loops, there are also drum players. When I do the drums, usually I like to add the drums piece by piece on layering stuff like adding a kick, then another kick, snare, clap, hi-hat, whatever. But there are also, I don't know how they are called, like pre-produced kits, and they are available for anything. And let me see, I have them down below. So I like to use this here. I think it's the Urban Groove Machine, Drake style kit, Dr. Dre style kit, and you can drag in just any kind of drums you want. Just play around a little. And this is something that they are using in trap music a lot. You can use the hi-hats and make it like this, and at the end you can create something like a hi-hat roll, or I think they call it stutter, and it goes like this. They play around with this a lot. It will sound like that. This is what they do a lot in trap beats, especially when you're listening to the Weeknd. So there are so many beats where they are using this type of it. It's not an effect, it's just a style that they are using, and I like to use it as well. Drums, and you can reduce it about 50%, so like this, because now I'm going to use gross beat. And when you set the gross beat effect to halftime, so the gross beat effect will only, for instance, you have this part of the beat, and if you use the gross beat effect and set it to halftime, it will only play the first two steps of the first bar. So this part here, which is empty, so will not appear in the song. So it depends on how you change the settings in crossbeat. And the thing is, if I would draw the drums differently like this, I just show you how it sounds like. Doesn't sound that bad either, but I draw the drums the way I want them to sound, and then I reduce the tempo about 50%, what I did here, and I do it with the other ones as well. Just put it here, and I do the same thing with this as well. So now it sounds like this. Doesn't sound bad at all, but it's a little bit too fast. I like when you're listening to the Weeknd, I like the more slow paced type of beat. And now we are going to add gross beat, and if you set it to halftime like this, you just have to drag it down and click on single curve, and the result will sound like this. For the bass I'm going to use Trilogy, and there's also another contact library. I don't know the name anymore because since I have so many contact libraries I get confused and I don't even know what I have and what I don't have. But it is anywhere down here. So we already have something like a bass. Oops. It's too loud. So since we have this low piano notes, so the electric piano, which is already, that distorted sound right here, it is already a little bit like a bass, and I'm going to take the low notes of it, put it here, listening to the WEEKND type of beats, you have probably noticed that the clap or the snare is always, or in many cases, it is filtered. It is that, I don't know how to explain it, I don't know the English word, I think it's some kind of a muddy sound, and there's a lot of reverb on it, sometimes distortion. Let's just play around with it. At first we need to find a snare or a clap. But I think we should go for, let's try a clap since we already have a snare in there. If you make beats, I recommend that you create or save your own presets for different situations. Like VTC gave me a couple of presets a few years ago. I do also create my own presets, but there are some VTZ presets that I use a lot. For instance, there's the snare filter number 2, and it creates the WEEKND type of clap sound. And we have to tweak it a little bit. What I don't like, I removed the high frequencies from the reverb. And I need a little bit more decay. any kind of sample, I always try to make it fit with the rest. So the kick drum is in a certain tune, and the beat is also in a certain tune, and it is always, you don't have to always do that. You can also do this with a filter, but especially if you use these 808 kind of drums, you have to how to explain it. If you use the drums, you should try to bring them in tune. Like, I can mute the rest, the bass, the drums, and just let the melody play. And now we have to figure out the tune. Changed a few details and I changed the arrangement. I'm a little bit tired right now and I don't want to work on this beat anymore. The thing is, when I start working on a beat, at a certain point I become tired and I'm creating new projects, and I'm not too happy with the result. I just wanted to show how I'm going to make beats. Sometimes I'm happy with the results. This one is okay, but it's not too special. But let's listen to what I got so far. I think it's better if I'm going to use the headphones, since my neighbors are going to complain if it will be too long during this time, because it's almost 8 o'clock.